Good morning. Thank you for viewing our video today, sponsored by the Law Office of Travell Travis, your low-cost, high-quality law firm. We are licensed in the District of Columbia and the Commonwealth of Virginia, with offices operating out of Richmond, Virginia, and Hampton, Virginia. But we may be available for consultations, seminars, workshops on church law, entrepreneurship, and other legal matters throughout the country. We ask you to connect with us by viewing and liking our fan page, visiting our website, as well as connecting with us on social media, in particular Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You also can email us at travelltravis@gmail.com. So website, social media, and email, Travell, Travell, Travis, Travis, and you can connect with us on those various platforms. We also encourage you to comment, like, share on these videos if you have any questions, or if these videos have been a benefit to you or perhaps to someone else. As a disclaimer, this video is for advertising and education and not a substitute for consulting a licensed attorney in your state. Today I want to give a part one of a part two series on whether a church should submit an application for 501c3 recognition by the IRS. But first, I want to discuss what legally constitutes a church. In the Bible days, churches did not necessarily meet in buildings. They met in homes. When you think about the upper room, there was a room in some building or a house. Even in the Old Testament, the tabernacle was a tent that moved around as the Lord led the children of Israel through the wilderness until the time that Solomon actually built the temple. Modern church history, if you look at some of our churches today, they started out as prayer groups, Bible studies that met in living rooms, dining rooms, basements, and even barns. When you look at even the history of our own church, the Way of the Cross, my founder started one church in a home, and another church down south, he used a barn. Today, people use homes, but also hotels, schools, auditoriums, and cafeterias. They use public libraries, as well as coffee shops for prayer, fellowship, and discussion. Even to make it even more modern than that, people are now using the internet, virtual churches, cyber churches, with social media, conference calls, and video chats. And so the question is, what legally makes a group of believers who come together for fellowship actually a church and actually tax exempt from the IRS? Some years ago, there was a group of young people who rented a building, and the purpose was to come together to smoke marijuana. And they wanted to be tax exempt as a church because they said that their regular gathering and smoking of marijuana was a religious practice, and the IRS denied their application. But aside from some extreme case from that, what really constitutes a church? The IRS has developed guidelines for churches, conventions, also association of churches. And so if you're part of a church organization, church reformation, church fellowship, or denomination, as well as what they call integrated auxiliaries. So there may be your foreign missions, there may be your youth department. I serve as youth president for our organization. And that entity would also be considered tax exempt along with the actual organization or denomination. But the IRS has come up with several criteria to determine what constitutes a church, and I won't go into all of them in detail. But number one, do you have a distinct legal existence? Is it a one-man operation, or have you incorporated as a non-stock corporation, a nonprofit corporation, or even as an unincorporated association? But essentially, you've created some type of structure and organization beyond perhaps one individual. Number two, do you have a recognized creed and form of worship? How do you worship? Where do you get your religious beliefs from? Is there any type of historical significance, biblical significance to it? Is it, even if it's considered perhaps outside the mainstream, are there certain traces, if there's certain legitimacy, perhaps to your beliefs, your doctrine, your beliefs as an organization. Number 3, do you have a definite ecclesiastical government? What is the hierarchy of your church? Do you have a pastor? Do you have a leader? Do you have a bishop? What's the order of the organization? Number 4, formal code of doctrine and discipline. Do you have a discipline manual? Do you have bylaws that not only give the governance of the organization, but also lays out what we do believe and what we do not believe? And where is that documented? Do you have a distinct religious history? Now, your history may be fairly modern in terms of meeting in a coffee shop or a meeting in a high school, but chances are the leader may have a history. Chances are the leader got started somewhere with some organization, with some group of people. They didn't just come out of nowhere and just start having Bible study in a coffee shop, generally without some type of foundation, initial exposure, whether seminary, having grown up in a church, or what have you. So there's a history that comes along with the organization. Number 6, membership not associated with any other church or denomination. That if I'm a member of your church, are there clear definitions of membership? If you have a Bible study, but the members are technically members of another church, then they're technically not a member of your church. They might visit, they might support, but do you actually have your own members? Do you actually have your own following? And that can vary. If you are an evangelistic minister, your members or your following may vary. And all these criteria vary depending on the type of ministry that you have. But looking at the totality, these are things that the IRS look at. So an evangelist that has conferences and crusades may not have a fixed place of worship, fixed time of worship, fixed membership or believers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a ministry. It's just those criteria are applied a little bit differently to the evangelistic ministry. The next criteria, do you have ordained ministers? Do you have criteria for ordaining ministers? Do you require them to go to seminary, take certain courses? What is the criteria for licensing and ordaining your leadership? Do you have literature of your own, brochures, websites? Do you have, once again, a discipline manual, some type of literature that describes what you believe, why you believe it, explains it to the community, as well as those who may want to fellowship or associate with your church? The next is, do you have an established place of worship? Doesn't mean you have to have a grand cathedral. It could be a hotel. It could be a school. It could be a coffee shop. And it can be that mobile location. But do you have a place where people will know when and where do you meet? That's very important. If you're a church, the public should know when and where you're having service. So if it's in your home, what time? If it's at a coffee shop, which one? What day of the week? So that not only are you just a closed organization, but if you're a church, you should be open to the public at large. Now, when we say a church, we're thinking specifically Christian organizations, but the IRS also looks at other denominations, Islam, Judaism, Hindu, other religious faiths, and they label them all as churches. So even if you're watching this video and you're not necessarily a Christian religious organization, the terms and the criteria that I'm giving for a church would also apply to those other denominations. Nextly, do you have a regular congregation? Do you have regular religious services? Do you have Sunday school for religious instruction of the young? Do you have other type of schools for the preparation of its members? And so when you look at these criteria, none of these criteria are conclusive in of themselves. But when we're trying to define what is a church, without having one set definition for all types of religious fellowships and organizations, the IRS does look at these criteria in determining, do you meet the criteria of being recognized as a church? And then more importantly, as a church, are you deemed to be a tax-exempt organization? And so in conclusion, as we look at this, the question then becomes, if I meet the criteria should I then file a 501c3 tax-exempt application to be considered a tax-exempt organization? Well, we're going to hold off on that question. The short answer is if you meet these criteria, you're considered a tax-exempt organization without necessarily having to file a 501c3 application. But in our next video, we're going to come back and discuss perhaps what are the pros and cons of actually filing the 501c3 application, when you may need to do it, who perhaps should consider doing so. Once again, I want to thank you for viewing this video, sponsored by the law office of Travell Travis, your low-cost, high-quality law firm. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. You can connect with us on our website, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. You also can email us and as well as contact us by telephone. We're available for consultations, workshops, and seminars throughout the country. And we thank you for, once again, joining us. As a disclaimer, this video is for advertising and educational purposes and is not a substitute for consulting a licensed attorney in your state. Once again, may God bless you. Have a blessed day and a blessed week.